I'm David Correa. I am executive producer for Stonewall Day. So pardon me if from time to time my eyes roll to the back of my head because I'm trying to think of something that's happening in just 2 days. But we are so excited to have you all here today. It's going to be an incredible program with some incredible members of our community talking about the legacy of Stonewall and exactly what we're here for today. So I am super excited to welcome Jay Valle, who is a reporter for NBC Out, and the incredible Mark Segal, who is a Stonewall pioneer and a strong supporter of Pride Live and all the work that we're doing to get to the opening of the Stonewall National Monument Visitor Center. They are two incredible humans who I've gotten to know Mark over the last couple months and got to know Jay pretty quickly. And they are here to have an incredible conversation. So without further ado, please welcome Jay and Mark.
Thank you. Happy Pride. Mark. Happy Pride. Happy Pride. I went and Mark and I just met for the first time, and an energy, a light, literally. And no, literally, like I told him too, like, I was like, this is a moment for me. Just want to give you a brief introduction of who I am. I'm a reporter with NBC Out, openly gay, and you have seriously paved a path. You really have. And I think TMZ sent us footage of something that happened maybe, I think on a Today Show when Barbara Walters was a host on there. Do we have that video? I think we do. But in that video,
Richardson's friends don't believe he'd accept the job. But Richardson is regarded as a politically ambitious man, and some Republicans speculate that he might see the prosecutor's role as a way to build up his reputation as Mr. Clean and perhaps to vault into the Republican presidential nomination in 1976. Paul Duke, NBC News at the Capitol.
U.S. District Judge John Sirica.
People are tired of NBC's bigotry.
What?
this is where the action happened, I think. I think it was 3 minutes where it should be coming up to you.
I'm sorry about that interruption. I assure you we had nothing to do with it. It was a surprise to us. Who he is, we don't know, but we'll find out. We've now turned him over to the hands of our protection people here at NBC to find out what that was all about. This program is full of surprises, isn't it?
Frank, I think we might tell our audience what the interruption was about a few moments ago. This is a live program, and even though we do have, not everyone can come into the studio, this young man said that he used an alias, said he was a college student and did get in. It was not a political protest. I went outside to talk to him. He was protesting against an NBC show, Sanford & Son, which was aired on Friday nights. He said that the program was unfair to homosexuals, or as he put it, unfair to gay people, and this was his way of making his protest known. We'll be back just a moment. This is Today on NBC.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. You were on a mission. I mean, what were you feeling in that exact moment? If you could take me back, what a rush, right? I think the adrenaline pumping, and at that time, I think most broadcasts were getting in about 60 million views, right from home. So tell me a little bit just about that moment. Recall that.
Okay. Happy Pride, everybody. So I was back in what we call the green room back there, and all of a sudden I thought of something and I started writing it down. So I very rarely ever make a note. But so this is what I wrote down. This is today, right here, right now, is sort of like a homecoming to me. Here are the reasons. It's a 50-year homecoming. This year, 2023, is 50 years since that happened. That happened literally 50 years ago. Anybody here even 50 years old? God, you're so young. That happened in 1973. And so it's even more of a homecoming because it shows you how far we've come. At that time, no LGBT person had ever been on network television anywhere. That was it. Barbara Walters became the first TV news person to ever say the word gay. That was the show that did that. So wind the clock up a few years later, and approximately 15 years ago, I got a call from Comcast saying, hey, we're starting this new thing. It's called the Joint Diversity Council. It'll be right under our board, and we would like you to be the first LGBT member of that board. And what does LGBT JDC mean? Well, the Joint Diversity Council at Comcast was what basically helped found NBC Out at NBC. It was the idea of making us as a people more out in every property that Comcast owned. And so when they called, it was a guy by the name of David L. Cohen called me. Some of you might know who that is. He's now our ambassador to Canada, U.S. ambassador. Called and said, Mark, we'd like you to join the JDC. I said, what does JDC stand for? He said, Joint Diversity Council. And I said, well, what am I going to do? He says, you're going to help consult with the network and tell us how we can make shows better and more inclusive for LGBT people, is it? I said, yeah, LGBT people. And I said, you know, David, I don't have time. It's just going to be a rubber stamp. And he said, no, it isn't. I said, okay, prove us wise. So about 6 weeks later, I found myself again back here at 30 Rock. And it was upstairs in one of those nice little conference rooms you had. And around me was the president of NBC News, some of the presidents of your NBC News show, Phil Griffin from MSNBC, president at that time. And they were all there to listen to me talk about how they can be more fair to us as a community. And so my first line to them was, gee, it's really nice to be back here at NBC. Last time I was here, you had me taken out in handcuffs.
What a moment. I think that's exactly my mindset right now, of homecoming, but also like oh yeah, I've made it back, and hi everybody, it's me, I'm back. Do you know exactly what floor you were hiding on? I hear you were hiding, is it this building?
It was in this very building. Today's show was in this building before they moved it across the street. But the story goes on a little further.
Yes, it does.
So for a long while, NBC wouldn't give me a copy of that clip. In fact, they wouldn't show it to anybody. It was hidden in the archive somewhere. Then on the 60th anniversary of the Today Show, they decided that they wanted to do a book about the history of the Today Show. And they wanted to include that, and they wanted me to be part of that book. It's like, you didn't want to invite me into your family all these years, didn't want me to talk about that all these years, and now you want me. So I said, okay, here's the deal. I'll be part of the book as long as you give me a copy of the Zap, which they did, which was nice. Then to go a little further to show you how we've really come full circle. So in 2019 for Stonewall 50, they said, you know, why don't you come on the Today Show and talk about it? So in June 2019 for Stonewall 50, on that Friday before the 50th anniversary of Stonewall, I came on and talked about that Zap, why we did it, and also included what was Stonewall about and how we got from Stonewall to 1969 to that point in 1973, and why I felt compelled to do that.
Yeah, a lot has changed too, right?
Yeah,
a lot.
So there's the NBC family, there's the Comcast family, and now there's my Pride Live family. And if I was going to say anything about that, I have to thank two openly out women of color who brought me here today. Diana, thank you very much, who's back there. And where's Mary Ann? Yeah. Mary, where are you? Somewhere in the crowd.
Those two are also organizing the Stonewall National Monument Visitor Center pop-up here, but also the pop-up will open in June 28th, 2024, which was the start of the Stonewall Uprising. And I know that we're kind of going back a little bit. I want you to briefly take us back to that, right? And then I want to talk about your background, but I want you to take us back to Stonewall Uprising, and you in that bar, 18 years old, and a shift was about to happen in the atmosphere within the LGBTQ plus community. And you were a major part of that. So I really want to get back to that piece right now. Yeah.
So you have to take it back to where I come from, which is different than most of you, because I'm old. Think about it. At Stonewall, I was 18. I'm now 72 years old. So it's kind of a long trip. But when I was growing up, it was very different than you. Some things are still the same today. So when I realized I was gay, it was like, okay, why can't other people talk about that? Why do I feel ashamed in a sense that I can't ask my parents about who am I? Why am I who I am? And I didn't understand that. In those days, in the 50s and 60s, you couldn't turn on the TV and find out who we were because it was illegal. It was against the FCC rules to discuss homosexuality on TV. Same thing on radio. So I couldn't turn on my radio. There were no talk shows to watch at. There was no cell phone. There was no internet. There was nothing. We weren't written about in newspapers or magazines unless we either committed suicide or committed crimes. That was it. So if I wanted to find out who I was, I would go to the library, as we were all taught to do. And what did I find in the library? Well, if I was lucky, there might be a few books. If I was lucky, they would be in the psychological department. They would be in the criminology department. They would tell me that I'm illegal, immoral, unemployable, and I need psychiatric care. That's how I grew up. So therefore, I felt, where I grew up in Philadelphia, that I was the only gay person in Philadelphia, a city of 1.6 million people. And I wanted to find people like me. So many people like me realized that the big city was calling, and that's where they're at. They're all in New York in this strange place called Greenwich Village because they have these strange people called hippies and alternative lifestyle. So I got to go to New York and find those people. So at 18, right after before I got out of high school actually, May 10th, 1969, I hopped on a train, came here, checked into Sloan House YMCA, 34th Street, and that night I got the train down to 4th Street, got off the subway, and there were no signs, neon signs said this way to the gay folk. You went looking, and for me, luckily, I found Christopher Street, and that became my home, for years. And what did that mean? I hung out there. That meant you would get there 7, 8, 9 at night, and you'd walk up and down the street with your friends talking. What did you talk about? You talk about fashion, talk about show business, talk about anything, but we didn't have a home to go to. That's why we walked up and down Christopher Street. And at the end of the night, what did you do? Well, if you're an 18-year-old, what does every 18-year-old want to do? You want to dance your ass off, right? The only place in New York you could dance was the Stonewall. So you would find your way into the Stonewall. That night, again, I was only in New York for 6 weeks. And the lights blinked on and off. And that was a little unusual to me. So I said to the person next to me, what is this? And the person casually said, oh, it's just a raid. Well, I didn't even understand what that was. Next thing I know, doors are bursting open, axes are being taken to the bar, bottles are being thrown around, people are being slammed up against the wall. Everything you could possibly imagine someone saying to someone is being said as they might be slapped down. My impression was, oh, we better call the police. Then I realized this was the police who were doing it. And that's when you feel really low because you're thinking, how low are we that the police, the people who are supposed to protect us, are coming in and doing this to us? And I was scared and I was frightened and bewildered. Didn't know what to think of it. But eventually, I got outside. Outside, a few of us started forming a semicircle, basically, around the door. I was standing right across the street at Sheridan Park. And just watching and thinking. I got to tell you a little bit about my grandmother here. My grandmother, Fatty Weinstein, came to this country because she was Jewish and Russian, and those days the Russians destroyed Jewish villages. So her family was forced to immigrate to the United States. She came here because of anti-Semitism. when she was in her 20s, she couldn't vote because she was a woman. She fought for the women's right to vote. When I was 13, she took me to my first civil rights demonstration, where I met Cecil B. Moore and other people. So standing outside, I'm seeing all this going on around me, and my first thoughts were, it's 1969. It's the height of the cultural revolution of America. Blacks are fighting for their rights. Women are fighting for their rights. When do we fight for our rights? And it was about that time I thought two things. One thing I thought was, okay, this is what I'm going to be doing. And then a guy by the name of Marty Robinson came up to me and handed me a piece of chalk and said, tomorrow night, go up and down the street, and on the street and on the walls write, tomorrow night, Stonewall. And I've been doing that ever since.
History there, and the Gay Liberation Front as well, right? I mean, I was reading your memoir, and you talk about it, and you were like, the Gay Liberation Front truly had been an impact and still continues to be an impact on the LGBTQ movement. And today it's very unfortunate to say, but we're kind of seeing a bit of a repeat, right? Especially towards Black, trans men and women, right? But there certainly has been a shift in broadcast and in media, right? Like I said, I'm an openly gay reporter at this point. I think that do you think maybe I'll have to start disrupting live TV someday with the climate we're in? I will do it, all right, in your name. I'm just kidding, because I know there's some folks in here. But
let's go to Florida and do it.
Let's go to Florida, yeah, certainly. But I know you were talking about your Nana, right? And she basically sparked activism in there for you. But without your Nana, you kept on going and going and going for decades. I'm very curious to know, what has kept you going all these years?
It's a great question. I can tell you about the last 20 years, my husband. So why this is a great homecoming for me. And I was talking about family. My family, first off, they supported me. My mother and father. So right after that, the following month, I disrupted the CBS Evening News with Walter Cronkite. And yes, 60 million people were watching that show.
There you go again.
Yeah. And the specific reason goes back to what we were just talking about, which is I grew up being invisible. That's the key word I would say is the one word of my life, visibility for us as a community. And I didn't want another kid to grow up and not have another person to look at and say, you could be happy, you could be a professional, you could be a reporter on TV, you could be anything you want, if you're LGBT. I didn't know that when I was a kid. I had to escape to New York. I had to live, not a great life in some respects, but it's brought me this far. So that was the beginning of it. Gay Liberation Front taught me how to aim that angered side of me, and I'm just like each and every one of you who's been in the closet. I was in the closet with my parents. I mean, think about it. No matter who we are, no matter where we fall in the political spectrum, we're all the same when we come out to our parents, all of us. It's frightening for all of us. So for me, it was sort of interesting in the fact that I had joined Gay Liberation Front. I had become the president of Gay Youth. I'm now 19 years old, and not come out to my parents. I'm doing all this activism. And so I'm actually teaching other people how to be out, how to come out to their parents, but yet I haven't done it to myself. I'm thinking, I got to do this. So I did it the real brave way. I picked up the telephone, called home.
Oh my God.
My father answered the phone. I said, Dad, I have to tell you something. He said, what? And I said, Dad, I'm gay. He said, yeah, I already knew that. He said, here, speak to your mother.
What gave it away?
I to this day, I don't know. My mom was a little circumspect. I said, Mom, I have to talk to you. I'm gay. Long pause. And then she said, you're my son, I love you. Another long pause. I said, and she says, I'm worried about when you get old that you'll be lonely. So the other part of your question is, If I was around today, I could say, Mom, for the last 20 years, I've been married. Mom, for the last 20 years, that man makes me happy. Oh, and by the way, Mom, we're legally married. Oh, and if that's not good enough, Mom, guess what? The President of the United States invited me to bring my husband to dance at a reception at the White House.
Yeah. Wow, a moment. Listen.
That's what keeps me alive. That movement forward. Family.
Absolutely. And I think that, I mean, did you ever imagine that? In a million years, the White House, right? No, it really truly is a testament of pushing forward, standing true in who you are, and it's inspiring. It truly is. And a lot of youth today are seeing that, and it's so important for them to learn that, right? And really the work that you have done has been just out of this world and continues to be, and you hold a legacy here as well, even here at NBC as well. We definitely see that. And I think that what I was kind of processing too is chosen family. I think everyone in here right now, I'm gonna call you Uncle Mark from now on. But I just want to say, really, we do have a chosen family in here. We kind of gravitate toward each other for those safe havens, for those moments, and I really just know that chosen family was important for you. It really has been, right? So tell me a little on where you and your husband are now. I mean, living happily, but doing, I want to know, how did you both meet? All right, I'm getting a little personal here, but I'm curious how you met, and then how you made it to the White House.
Well, you're asking my favorite question, because if there's nothing, the number one topic I love to talk about is my husband, Jason. So about 20 years ago, I had broken up with a relationship, and I was so miserable, down very badly. And my good friend Robbie was talking with a friend who was at NYU, who was into journalism, theater, two things I love dearly. And he said to the guy, well, why don't you call my friend Mark? He needs to talk to someone who has the same interest in him. And so Jason literally emailed me then. And we had, for about a year, we started emailing with each other. Not on the phone, just for 1 year. Every single night, we emailed each other for about 2 or 3 hours, literally. And we really got to know each other. And on several occasions, he invited me to come up to New York. And I felt, I shouldn't do that. And finally, he said, well, if you're not coming up to Philadelphia, to New York, I'm coming down to Philadelphia. And I had not been on a date in a year. I had not seen anybody else. And I was in a long-term relationship before that. And so I said, I finally agreed. He came down. And we had what he and I both would think would be a whirlwind date. He arrived at Philadelphia's 30th Street Station. I picked him up. We went to, if any of you, most of you don't know Philadelphia, there's a skating rink upstairs. We have similar in Philadelphia. We basically, the people who run it took everybody off, allowed just the two of us to have the whole rink, and we were there for about an hour. Then we went to, I think you have a Budokan in New York. Well, the original's in Philadelphia. They cleared out part of that for us and allowed us to have that. Then we went to the top of City Hall, to the Art Museum, Rocky Steps. Yeah, I overdid it.
This was a trip.
I overdid it on a date.
Hey, you know what? Those emails, though.
We've been together since.
I can imagine those emails were just filled with great conversation, right? So at that point, you're meeting each other.
We got to know each other.
And how fantastic is that, right? We're not doing the phone thing. It's not the Instagram DM. I'm not tagging you in a post. You're genuine. That's what a date should be like. I want a date like that. I really do.
But when you get to know somebody, really know somebody, and you marry them and get part of their life. So the part that was bothering me was that I never talked about my history. For many years, I went from project to project to project, and didn't look back. First there was Gay Liberation Front, then there was Gay Youth. Then from those zaps, to show you how things in our community build, there's an actual timeline that goes from literally Stonewall, and I point to you, Diana, when I say that now, from Stonewall to this building, from this building to media in general, and then from doing the Zap here and at Cronkite, I thought I was, at that point for about a year, I was probably the best known activist in America. And I started appearing on
Still
shows.
are.
No. Still appear on shows like Phil Donahue Show, which was great because what happened was we didn't just have to force our way on TV. They were now inviting us to come and talk. And that was really good because that's what we want. We wanted to start the conversation. We wanted them to see who we were and why we were angry or needed support and why we wanted allies. So I did that, and I thought, I'm hot. You can figure out the other word. I'm going to write the governor of my state and tell him I want to meet with him. Well, no governor had ever met with a gay activist before. To my shock, he agreed to meet with me. So we meet. His secretary said this is a very off-the-record meeting, which I expected. And we go into the meeting. He says, "What can I do for you?" And I said, "Well, you could make a commission. It's going to see what the problems of LGBT people are in the state. You could issue an executive order and say that you can't discriminate against gay men and lesbian women in state employment. You could issue a gay pride resolution." And he said, "Okay, let me look into all these things." I thought, I'm going to leave this office, which nobody knows I'm in a meeting with, and all those things won't happen. Well, his aide opens the door, and all of a sudden, there are all these flash cubes. While I was in that meeting, his press people had called the entire press pool of the state of Pennsylvania, Associated Press, UPI, the networks, and they were all there. And so as the doors are open, as the cameras go on, he reaches over to shake my hand, and he taps me on the back and says, "By the way, I caught you on the Cronkite show." Those zaps created that meeting, which, think about this, created all the governmental commissions that exist in today's government, created the first liaisons between government and the LGBT community. They all stand on the shoulders of that governor, who's Governor Milton Schaaf, by the way, and my political mentor. In fact, you saw the way I used to dress. He's the guy who said, if you want to get things done, you got to change your act. And that's literally...
Did they make you shave your mustache?
Yeah, shaved.
No.
Sorry, that's where the mustache went. And the long hair. And he bought me a blue blazer. And guess what I'm wearing? A blue blazer.
Mark, you are man with a plan, continue to be a legend. And people use the word loosely, icon. You are iconic. You remain an icon. Thank you so much for sharing so much of that with us. Thank you. We appreciate that. Thank you, Mark.
Sorry I had too much coffee.
We love the energy. No, we love the energy.